Jimmy Butler has officially requested a trade from the Miami Heat and is looking to possibly get moved as soon as possible. Pat Riley has another situation of a superstar wanting out of his team, and what team in the association will be best for Jimmy Butler as a landing spot as well as for the Miami Heat to take a buyer from. We're going to talk about all of that on this episode of Heat Digest, but first things first, my name is Manuel Buroz, and please, I really urge you guys to hit the subscribe button as we get closer and closer to growing this community. As you guys can see here, 82% of you guys, almost 83% of you guys are not subscribed. So we ask you guys subscribe, especially if you're enjoying the content, enjoying the up-to-date information that we're bringing you here on the Heat Digest family, and what we're trying to continue to do and to continue to develop and build. With that being said, we're going to talk about three main things here. How we got here, what exactly here is with the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler, what a realistic, because there's always going to be trade rumors for any team out there, but what a realistic outcome looks like for both the Heat and Butler, and then what the future holds. What exactly can we go now that we've gone from the post Big Three era to the Jimmy Butler era to now what era is next for the Miami Heat and their history. Like I mentioned, we're going to start first things first with how did we get here? And that can be a pretty simple thing. Jimmy Butler has really kind of continued this crusade, one could even say, of he just feels like the Miami Heat have not been giving him help. As you can see here, per Shams, the last 3 summers, Jimmy urged them to make moves. Celtics went and got Drew and KP. Heat didn't get anybody. For Jimmy Butler, I think it's come down to a situation of he's fed up with not being able to get over that hump, with being okay. And now I understand, again, in his defense, I completely understand why he's upset if that's the situation, if that's the case. Again, going off the reports from Sham and a few others, that has been a very consistent theme in the later or in the more recent years of Miami Heat basketball since really getting Jimmy Butler. I mean, Jimmy Butler was our last real big-time acquisition when we talk about a superstar level player, but it hasn't really mounted to anything. Again, Jimmy Butler, if we're being honest here, he is one of the best players in the association. He's a playoff riser. We all know this. We know what he's done in a Miami Heat uniform, but he probably can't be the best player on your championship team consistently. Maybe you're going to get a year like we did in 2023 when we made that championship run, but you're not going to be able to say, let's run it back because we have Butler on our team as he continues to get older. And if that's where a lot of his frustration is coming from, I can understand that, and I can understand why he has been fed up to this point. However, we know that things just have not been really working for Miami Heat and Butler. You see here, the Heat essentially have made implications to the entire organization, the entire league almost, that the people in his camp and Jimmy Butler himself, they are not playing to their hearts. They're not playing with the intentions of being in Miami. And this has been going on for a while, to the point now where people are noticing it on TV. Like, we can tell from these Heat games that Jimmy Butler is just checked out mentally and does not want to be with the Miami Heat, which leads us to the biggest thing and the biggest news that, honestly, it's the first time that I've ever really heard it like this, where Jimmy Butler, as of today, as of this recording, he has been officially suspended 7 games and will be fined for all 7 of those games with conduct detrimental to the team. Those are the exact words that the Miami Heat released in this statement as to why they have suspended Jimmy Butler. Now, talking from the Heat side of things, I can understand it. I really can. We're talking about you don't want to have a distraction. You know how the media can be, and they're constantly going to ask questions to both Butler, to Spo, to Pat Riley, to Hero, Bam, and the entire organization of like, where's Jimmy? How is Jimmy? How are you guys dealing with the Jimmy Butler situation? And they're still going to ask those questions, but you can take a precautionary trail here with moving Butler altogether from the situation and just saying, look, stay home and don't worry about it. However, I wouldn't be surprised if this really escalates a little bit more. I would not be surprised if this really does escalate things a little bit. And in these situations, we know Jimmy Butler's history. We know Pat Riley's history, which I'll get to in a minute here. When it comes to these type of situations and just incidents, you can only do damage control so much. I do think it's inevitable when you have the personalities involved that you do in this current problem here or current situation. things are going to get a little testy. Things are going to get, and, again, Butler has shown he doesn't mind making things uncomfortable for people. Pat Riley's shown he doesn't mind making things uncomfortable for people. Like, there's already been reports that if the Heat do not get a trade within those 7 games, he could be coming back to the team. So there's a lot of things that could go sideways here, but I do think this is good from a perspective of you keep Butler healthy. You don't want him. The last thing you want, we all know it as athletes, and even if you never played sports, you know the age-old warning of if you go out there and play anything, pick up basketball, professional basketball, anything at all, training, and you're not 100% mentally and you're not really locked in there, that's when injuries happen and that's when things can really go bad for you. And the last thing that the Heat need, and Butler for that matter, is for him to get an injury. Nothing crazy, but even if you're out a couple months, if you're out a couple weeks, that could really hurt your trade value for the long term. And like I mentioned, it's not just the 7 games of suspension. Butler has also been fined, and here's a breakdown. Butler's being fined $336,543 for each of the 7 games missed. That amount is going to be 145th of his $48 million contract, totaling for around $2.4 million. Now, it's already been reported that the NBPA, the National Basketball Players Association, is going to file a grievance, as you can see right there. He has 30 days to file that grievance. It's already been filed. It's going to be a whole situation of putting that money in escrow, and the NBPA is pretty much issuing that there was a statement that they issued saying the suspension is excessive and inappropriate, as you can see down there at the bottom. Again, I don't disagree with that either. I do think that Butler and the NBPA have some ground here on saying I think 7 games is a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if it dwindles down to about 5. Now, the Heat do have, again, they have their own situation or own footing to stand on of, hey, we have a right to say these 7 games because look at what's happened. Look at the point that it's gotten to with some of his post-game comments, to some of the in-game body language and behavior. So this is a situation where I think both sides are right. I don't know necessarily if anyone's gonna really waver. I think it might just sit to the 7 games and the fines, maybe just one or the other, or maybe just the 7 games. I do think if the Heat had to choose, I think they'd rather have the 7 games than the fine, if I'm being honest. But we'll see when that time does come. But that's kind of how we got here. And again, before we move on to the next part of this video, I do want to mention one more time Pat Riley's reputation for, again, making things uncomfortable if need be, and kind of not getting anything in return. The worst thing in the situation for the Miami Heat right now is Butler walks for nothing. That is the worst thing. We know he's out of here. He's going to leave here, whether it's by trade during the season, in the offseason, or he's not picking up his player option. Well, he might actually pick up his player option to get that $50 million additional money. But I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't, just to get out of Miami. I really wouldn't. Again, $50 million, a lot of reasons to stay, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And we have seen, in past that Pat Riley, he let Dwayne Wade walk for nothing. He let Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Moore, he's let some big name players walk for nothing. I don't think it's going to happen this time around. I do kind of hope that this is the first of maybe of the many in the future. In good situations more than bad, where Pat Riley can get some type of assets for Jimmy Butler. We'll talk about exactly what those assets are right now. So we've mentioned on how we got here. We've talked about, now we're going to talk about what a realistic expectation is. Again, I know that there are trades out there for everybody, for all 29 other teams for the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. Now, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a Miami Heat trade out there too, just throwing all 30 because people love to really try and go into it. I'm going to focus on the 3 most realistic ones that I think will happen. I'm not saying that we can't get into the crazies, and if y'all want to get into the crazies, like Houston might send some other videos, leave that in the comments below. We'll take some players that you guys maybe want to see on Miami, and we can make shorter videos just breaking down that one trade, how it could work, why it wouldn't work, the X's and O's and basketball side of things, the money side of things. Like if you want us to break down the crazy ones, we can do that. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm all for it. Just let it know in the comments down below who exactly the crazies are for you guys. I'll give you guys the 3 realistic teams here in a minute, but before we continue, we'll talk about exactly the landscape of the NBA. You can see here a lot of stuff. Basically, in the past, in these situations when there has been something of a disgruntled star player, you always want to try and you kind of want to get him off your books and get him out of the locker room, not as fast as possible, but you want to get him out and not have to deal with it in the long term. That was the old NBA. With the new collective bargaining agreement and new situations with the aprons and all this other stuff, it's really, really hard to do that. And I've talked about it in the past when we talk about other situations of players wanting out or players, what trades can teams make just flat out to try and get better, and just not a lot of cap space out there. Teams don't want to get put in the second and in the first apron to mess up their futures and all this other stuff. So I'm kind of saying that before I talk about these trades so you guys understand it's going to be a lot harder than normal to try and trade a player like Jimmy Butler with the contract he's on and with the situation that he finds himself in as things stand today. Again, an aging star who has a history of injuries at times, who has history of having ugly exits. This is what, it'd be his fourth team now, fifth team with Miami. Obviously, Chicago did not end well. Minnesota did not end well. Philadelphia was okay, but we all know about the whole Tobias over me thing. And now Miami, as ugly as it's been, it probably has been the most easy transition, if I'm being honest. But again, it was still an ugly end to this Heat stint for him. So things are not going to be necessarily, I don't think everybody's knocking down at the door for Jimmy Butler. There are going to be some suitors, and we'll get to that in a minute here. But I want to talk about what the landscape is for the Miami Heat and for Butler in this current iteration of the NBA. Now, we move on here. This report here, the only thing I really want you guys to focus on is that first quote right there from ESPN's Brian Windhorst. The Miami Heat, quote, don't like their hand right now at all when it comes to trades involving Jimmy Butler. Basically meaning they know that they're not in the position right now to get a trade that they really like, which is understandable. Again, Jimmy Butler, like I just mentioned, all the reasons that teams maybe are hesitant. It's also maybe a one-year rental because you got to kind of talk him into maybe re-signing. Do you really want to sign him when he's aging into his 40s, stuff like that? So I understand why the Heat's hand right now is not what they like, but I do think if they hold out, there's going to get some good stuff here in a minute. So we'll go into the first team. For me, the first team that I hopped into the trade machine, you guys know I'm a big supporter of this trade of these two teams. It's the Miami Heat and Houston Rockets. The trade in front of me, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Aaron Holiday, Cam Whitmore for straight up just for Jimmy Butler. Now, I do have some trade notes for this situation. Houston, I think, is the best buyer for the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. They have everything you need. They have young players that the Miami Heat can build with. They also can get the assets because I do think, as you can see right there, Miami will get in this trade a 2025 first-round pick, top 5 protected, a 2027 first-rounder, and a 2029 first-rounder. Again, this is a trade that I did, popped in the trade machine. I added a few things into it with these picks, but I also went into my research online and I found the trade as well. So this is something that can work and it has been kind of tested. In the end, though, there's something that I want you guys to notice at the bottom there. Keep an eye on Houston in the summer with Jalen Green. Jalen Green right now, I do think he can be a player that the Rockets can trade. Only in the summer, and I'll mention that in a minute here. He can only be traded in the summer because, honestly, I wouldn't mind maybe taking a fly on Jalen Green because I do think Miami's in a situation where they can either retool or rebuild, but I don't think they really want to rebuild right now with Bam on the roster, with Hero on the roster, Jaime, Khalil Ware going to develop. I think they still have some capable players to be able to at least be playoff contenders every single year and develop those guys with experience. But that is the first trade that I came up with that I found. Again, is going to be Jimmy Butler for Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith, Aaron Holiday, Cam Whitmore. Obviously, you put in Dillon Brooks into Jimmy Butler's starting spot as a defender, as an improved offensive player. Jabari Smith Jr., he's kind of been, again, because of the depth that the Rockets have, he's been a little bit shuffled. You put him at the 4, you move Bam to the 5, or keep him at the 5, I should say. You could even switch the two, if I'm being honest here. I do think Jabari Smith is a very capable rim protector, so I wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. You're kind of playing almost 2 4s, really, and you can really play 5-out basketball like that. Aaron Holiday is a solid backup point guard. I do think he can help with the ball handling responsibilities. And Cam Whitmore, I'm really, really high on Cam Whitmore. I think he can really just kind of improve and benefit from being in Heat culture and being with the Miami Heat. Now, that trade that I mentioned with Jalen Green, that trade looks something like this. The big swing. I found this online on The Athletic. Is going to be the Heat acquire Bojan Bogdanovic, DeAnthony Melton, Zaire Williams, a first-round pick and a second-round pick from the Nets, Jeff Green, and a first-round pick with a second-round pick attached from the Rockets. The Rockets get Jimmy Butler, Josh Richardson, and Keon Johnson goes to the Brooklyn Nets, who also get Jalen Green, Jock Landale, Jashawn Tate, Aaron Holiday from the Rockets. I really like this trade for everybody involved. We break it down for Miami. You get a rotational player in Bojan Bogdanovic who can space the floor. Obviously not going to play heavy minutes, but if in 18 to 15 minutes he can give you 12 points, I think that's very, very good. D'Anthony Melton's obviously dealing with an injury right now, but by then, this will be a trade that happens in the summer. By then, he should be a little bit closer to coming back and being healthy. Again, another ball handler who can play defense. He was really good for the Warriors. They were really high on him before he got injured, and they had to trade him to Brooklyn. So I do think Melton could be a nice pickup. Zaire Williams, a young, athletic wing. He can space the floor. He's gotten much better with shooting the ball, and he can play defense. You also get 2 picks from the Nets. Jeff Green, just a veteran presence in the locker room. We all know what Uncle Jeff can do when he does get some minutes in the playoffs, especially. So I do think he'll be a good just leader and mentor for a lot of these young players who are now going to be thrusted into being cornerstone pieces officially. And you also get some first round and second round picks from the Rockets. From the Rockets, not going to harp on it too much. You always take Jimmy Butler. You help with the reason I like the Rockets and in this trade with Miami, or any trade with Miami, they're going to make a playoff push. Right now, I believe they're in top 3 right now in the Western Conference, no lower than top 4. So they're going to make a playoff push here, and you can go one of 2 ways. You can either know that's going to come, and then you find a superstar-ish player who can help with that, or you can go with the route of let's let the young guys go out there, figure it out by throwing them to the fire and see what happens. I think it's better if you go with the Jimmy Butler. I say Jimmy Butler, but I mean the star route. So that way when you get there, you have someone who's been there to the highest level and can help these young players really figure out what's going on and how to maneuver it. And then the Nets, you take a flyer on Jalen Green. Worst case, he hits, and now you've got another trade piece for the future to try and flip in the next years to come after the post whatever right now for the Nets. Again, a few notes here from this trade. Like I mentioned, Jalen Green cannot be traded until the summer due to his extension. D'Anthony Melton can't be traded technically until February 13th because of the recently traded restrictions. The Nets, like I mentioned, take a flyer on Jalen Green. Heat get both young players and picks from the Rockets, and then the Rockets get their young star to lead this young group. Again, this is a summer possibility. I don't really think it's going to happen in the season, but I do think it's something to keep an eye on when we move into the summer if Butler is still with Miami, and depending on how the Rockets playoff push goes. Now, this trade. The Rockets are someone that I really like, but someone that I don't think they're talking about enough. The Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies are going to be, I think, a suitor for Jimmy Butler. In this 3-team trade, you got Miami Heat. They get Tim Hardaway Jr. from the Pistons, Brandon Clark from the Grizzlies, Luke Kennard from the Grizzlies, and Gigi Jackson, who I'm really, really excited if he does come to Miami Heat. The Grizzlies get Jimmy Butler, Alec Burks, and then the Pistons get Marcus Smart. Now, a few things to note on this trade. I think this is the best for Miami from both assets and picks, because I do have Miami, or the reports are that Miami could get 2 second-round picks from Detroit and then a first from Memphis, which would be awesome if the Heat can get both rotational players like Clark and Tim Hardaway Jr., and then you get 3 picks from between the Pistons and the Grizzlies. You also get some expiring deals for Miami, because if you go look back here at the trade, Hardaway's on a 1-year deal, and so is Luke Kennard. So worst case, you let them walk, you clear up some cap space, and now you can go in free agency and find what you like in the market. The reason that this trade could work in my head, similar to the Rockets, the Memphis Grizzlies, yes, they do have a much better team. They also have a deep, deep team. They can afford to lose some rotational players and not really miss a beat. But you're going to need somebody like Jimmy Butler in the locker room. Marcus Smart has been really injury-riddled. He hasn't been able to really find his footing with Memphis like we all thought he would when he got traded there. So could you imagine Jimmy Butler, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. being the big 3 to lead this group? I really think, and you still got some young players like Santi Aldama. You still have Scottie Pippen Jr. You still have some really good pieces. I think that this could really help the Memphis Grizzlies in the loaded Western Conference. When you look behind you, you got the Spurs with Victor Wembanyama. You got the Thunder, who have just not burst on the scene, but they finally have taken their rightful spot as the best team in the West. You still got the Lakers and the Grizzlies. You still got the Lakers and the Nuggets and the Clippers. So they need to make a trade before the entire West just passes them by. I do think that this could be a trade for them. For the Pistons, they're just looking to make the play-in. If they can get a Marcus Smart to help with the leadership in the locker room, for the Cade Cunninghams of the world, for the Jalen Durns, the Jaden Ivies, you really can't get any worse than the Pistons are right now. So if they can make this trade and get into the postseason, or into the play-in tournament postseason picture, I think that's a win for them. And like I mentioned for Miami, you get picks, you get rotational players. Again, you break it down here by exactly what's on the trade. Tim Hardaway Jr. and Luke Kennard, worst case, they're going to space the floor for you. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not a horrible defender. Luke Kennard, again, when he's hot, he's one of the best shooters in the association. I'm really high on Brandon Clark because if you can pair him with Khalil Ware, with Bam Adebayo, you've got a front court that can really do some damage in the East. And Gigi Jackson, some questions about his play style, but we've seen him in limited minutes, or in opportunities, I should say, last year in his rookie year, where he was able to put the ball on the ground, make some plays, and have some big performances against some top talent. I remember that game against the Lakers specifically. He really had a good performance. So I really think this could be another trade for Miami when we talk about the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes, specifically with the Grizzlies, because I also have a straight-up Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard, Jake LaVeria for Jimmy Butler. This trade's a little bit farther fetched. I do think this is a situation. I just kind of wanted to have a trade with just Memphis and Miami. The thing with this trade is Miami can retool around Hero and Bam with these picks, with these players. Memphis, again, with so much depth on their team, they can really afford to make this trade of giving up. In hindsight, when we look at it, Clark's been injured, so it's kind of hard to call him a rotation player, even though he is when he's healthy. Luke Kennard is a rotational player. Marcus Smart would be a rotational player. But again, two of those three are injury-riddled. Jake LaVeria, he's going to be missed a little bit, but nothing crazy. So I do think you can get away with making this trade. Picks would be involved from Miami to Memphis, though. I do think you can't get away with a trade like this and not have any picks from Miami. So I do think you got to throw in some type of first round, maybe even some seconds. But this will be a nice trade that I just wanted to do this trade to see if we can do something straight up, no third team involved. And that's what I came up with. The final trade, which I think everybody and their mother knows who or what the teams are, the Heat, the Suns, and the Kings. This, to me, is the most realistic outcome. It really is. We all know that Jimmy Butler's been tied to Phoenix with Bradley Beal. The Heat do not want Beal. The Heat should not want Beal. The Miami Heat should do anything they can to not have Bradley Beal on their team, specifically because of the contract, and he just doesn't fit the timeline. He doesn't. In this trade, I got De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter going to Miami. Jimmy Butler and Josh Richardson are going to Phoenix, and then Bradley Beal is going to go to Sacramento. The full breakdown for me for this trade. The only thing I can kind of summarize these trades from both of the Sacramento and the Phoenix. Sacramento's got problems right now. You obviously just fired Mike Brown. You're kind of stumbling a little bit here with the situation of where you are in the Western Conference. You feel like they are a team that got passed by, even though they had some good years earlier on. Phoenix is in desperation mode. They're in desperation mode. They're really good with Kevin Durant. They're really bad without him. Bradley Beal just hasn't worked out for them. They need to work around KD and Book. This is the best trade I feel like they can do without really losing too much, because anything else is less than Bradley Beal. Best for Miami to stay competitive for the future, because, again, you get a situation where you have De'Aaron Fox, who is going to slot into that number one role of a guaranteed one that Miami never really has had. Because if you look at the past point guards, Kyle Lowry was great over his prime, over the hill. He was kind of already out the door, and he did a lot, honestly, for what he was at in his career. Terry Rozier, he's had some good stints so far. He's gotten better, but he's been inconsistent when we talk about scoring, because that's really what his role is. I think he'd be better as a sixth man, as somebody who's playing off of a primary ball handler. De'Aaron Fox, he is a primary ball handler. He can push the pace with Miami. He is also a great defender. Again, always a leader in the league in steals, always top 5 in that department. A great defender, just period, instead of just not just with getting steals and playing the passing lanes and being active in the passing lanes as well. He would just fit perfectly, I feel like, next to Tyler Hero. A faster pace there with Miami if you're going to play Bam at the 5. Even with the Khalil Ware when he starts getting a groove in. With Triple J, with Jaime Jaquez Jr., you have Duncan Robinson, still space on the floor. You'll have Terry coming off the bench. I think the pace is really going to mess a lot of teams up. And if you get Kevin Huerter in the deal, you got another backup for Tyler Hero. Could even start on certain nights when Hero's injured or when he can't play, when he's not having a good offensive night, because those happen. Kevin Huerter, spot-up shooter, a movement shooter. He can play off with DHOs. He's similar to Duncan Robinson pretty much. Again, defending might be a little bit of an issue, but you stagger those minutes. I think you can get away with that. You can even flip Kevin Huerter there if you really, really wanted to. But I do think this is the most realistic trade. I really do. I think it's a trade that makes the most sense for everybody involved. You also, again, like I mentioned, you just cannot take the Beal contract onto the books. You really can't. You cannot take this Beal contract. The Miami Heat need to do whatever they can to try and keep Bradley Beal's contract off the books, because I don't think they're going to be able to get it and flip him to a third team. I don't even think this trade can work, because it really comes down to Beal and saying yes to being traded. Now, obviously, he can maybe work something out with his agent. If he does go to Sacramento, they'll flip him immediately to somebody else, buy him out, whatever. But with Beal having the no trade clause, it really comes down to that situation with when it comes to Bradley Beal. But those are the teams that I think are the most realistic. I personally am a fan of the Rockets. I don't know why, but I just really, really like what they have, and I think that it'll definitely help them. I want to send Jimmy out west. I do think that that's the biggest thing. You send him out west, you don't got to deal with him during the conference run. I think the Memphis one is underrated that a lot of people are talking about, so that's why I really wanted to harp on that one. And then the most realistic is, I think, going to Sacramento and getting De'Aaron Fox. But once this trade happens, because it will happen, Jimmy Butler, I don't think he'll finish the year as a Miami Heat. I really don't. What is the future for Miami? And the future, to be honest with you guys, is pretty simple, and it comes down to two people, Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. That's what it comes down to. Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, they are going to be the future for this team. They're going to be the future for the next 5 years, the next 6 years. They're both still relatively young with what's been added to a player's prime in the NBA with, the advancements in medical and all that kind of stuff. Teams are going to have these players for a lot longer. I think Tyler Hero's found a home in Miami. I think Bam Adebayo's found a home in Miami. What I do think you got to come away with this saying is Tyler Hero can be your second best player on championship team. I don't think Bam can be your second best player on championship team. I think he's got to be your third. I do. Unless his offense takes another step, I just don't see him being that level of offensive threat. The defense is what it is. It's always going to be there. He is the anchor. You have a defensive anchor with Bam. You got to develop these young players. You got to build what the Thunder kind of did, what the Spurs kind of did without obviously Wemby and Shea and all that stuff. But what I'm saying is you want to build a team, the Knicks. You want to build a team without a star per se, but something that people like and people want to play with. Brooklyn back in 2019 with D'Angelo Russell, with Spencer Dinwiddie, with Karis LeVert. That is what you want to build if you're in Miami. Because when you have a coach like Spo and an organizational culture like Miami, you're going to be able to do more than those Brooklyn Nets teams did. They got to the playoffs. They took a game off Philly, and that was it. It was a nice ride. We all enjoyed it as fans. I enjoyed it. The bench ride was great. I loved that. We can do that down here in Miami, but we can even be more of a threat because you always know what the story is of Miami. There's just something about them. And if you can build that without a star, Miami is going to attract star attention. Then you can do that. You can do it in free agency. You don't got to make trades. You don't got to trade none of your young guys. But with that being said, the future, the next few years, the Bam Hero era will be affected for the entire era with what comes out of this Jimmy Butler trade. You have to get picks. You have to get young players. You got to get both if you can, but you got to get something where you can build for the future. You're not trading a lateral move. Even De'Aaron Fox, he's young enough to where it's not a lateral move. It's an improvement, in my opinion, because of the age and because of the timeline for Hero, Bam, and Fox. All right. But again, like I mentioned before, those are the trades that I really like, that I think are most realistic. If you guys want us to do the crazy ones, the ones that, probably won't happen, but it's fun to talk about, drop those down in the comment below. Let's focus on West teams. I do think Miami's going to send him out West. I don't think they want to deal with him in the East. But, hey, if you guys want some Heat East trades with, Cleveland, I've heard some rumors about them. I think I have some ideas for that one. If you want to talk about Philadelphia, I do think there's something there. If the Sixers want to get away from the Paul George experiment, I think that's a possibility there. Again, I don't think Miami really wants that, but I'm all for it. So drop down below the crazy ones that you guys want us to talk about, and we'll talk about that on the future episodes. But thank you, and we'll watch you on the next one, a Heat Digest.